If you know one thing about Final Fantasy VII, it's that Aerith dies. The praying girl gets cut down by the guy with the massive sword. There's a reason why this pivotal story beat is one of the most well-known spoilers in gaming. It's a moment that's continually stunned players since 1997.
No, no, no.
Why?
This is basically the Bambi's mum getting shot moment of video game history.
Video games had killed off significant characters before Final Fantasy VII, but this was different. The resonance Aerith had with fans is incomparable, and the emotional impact of her death left many players desperate for a resurrection.
The legend of reviving Aerith, literally since the game came out, people were making that legend up.
My brother told me there's a way you might be able to bring her back.
What I really wanted to do was just surprise people, so I scripted this alternate route where you keep Aerith around.
Over 25 years, rumour became myth, myth became hoax, and eventually hope became a way to genuinely save the Gainsborough. Aerith Gainsborough is one of the most beloved characters in RPG history. First introduced as little more than a flower merchant in the opening hour of Final Fantasy VII, she soon becomes a significant figure in the story's central cast. The revelation that she is the last remaining member of an ancient race positions her as vital to the plot that made fans fall in love with her.
From the moment you meet her, she's charming, she's very sweet, but she has a little bit, as you learn later on, a little bit like some spunk here and there. She was just one of those characters that immediately I personally fell in love with.
I think she's a really, really fantastic character where you can't judge her based on her appearance. And I kind of assumed, like, since she dresses really conservatively and you obviously see like the pictures of her praying, I thought she was going to be quite sweet, but also kind of serious and boring and sort of self-sacrificial. But then it couldn't be further from the truth.
Well, look who it is.
She's someone that doesn't take things too seriously. She's full of life and she tries to get everyone else to enjoy it along with her.
Aerith's death comes out of nowhere, and happens just as Final Fantasy VII gears up for its apocalyptic second half. Having learned that villain Sephiroth plans to force a meteor to crash into the planet as part of his attempts to ascend to godhood, protagonist Cloud and his friends head to the Forgotten City. There, Aerith will call upon the ultimate white magic, Holy, which she hopes will protect the world from the impending doom. Tragically, Sephiroth fatally interrupts the ritual at the final moment.
It was absolutely earth-shattering because she was always on my team. I just loved her. Like, I don't know, something about her character. She was just so sweet and pure. And for whatever reason, because maybe it is her personality and just who she is, it's life-changing. Like, I still haven't gotten over her death years later.
Aerith does die activating the holy spells. There is this temptation to think of it as some noble sacrifice, but it's really not. It's just like a horrible tragedy that happens. And I think that's quite different to how death is usually handled in video games, certainly at this point in time. I really feel like the tragedy of it is encapsulated by that one key artwork when Aerith is looking up at the highway. That becomes really bittersweet for me because she was the most adventurous of the whole party. Like, she would have loved that, but she never gets to ride that airship.
Aerith's death is an important and irreversible moment in the story of Final Fantasy VII. But while she may have died in the game, Aerith endures through fan fiction, fan art, and, of course, cosplay.
Once I became a cosplayer, which I was about 20 years old when I actually started, I said, she's a bucket list. I have to do her, but if I do it, I have to do it at least correct or as what I feel is good for me, good enough for me.
She's probably the character in Final Fantasy VII that I see myself the most in. So I knew that as soon as I'd finished the game that I wanted to cosplay her, not just to sort of show my appreciation towards a game I really enjoyed, but also just because I love the character so much. And since then, the Final Fantasy VII community has become such a massive part of my life. So I feel like it's made the cosplay really special to me.
The fantastic creations of Final Fantasy fans are just one part of Aerith's story though. If you were ever a school kid during the days of the original PlayStation, then you'll almost certainly know that there was a much bigger mystery around Aerith's death than just how to create a worthy epitaph. The persistent playground rumours about a secret method to bring her back from the dead.
I remember when I was in school, elementary school, because I had one of my best friends used to play and he said, my brother told me there's a way you might be able to bring her back. And I remember one of the things he said that stuck with me that I remember trying and obviously didn't work was you had to have the max amount of Phoenix Down saved up in your inventory, but that's not all. After her death, immediately you had to hit start button or get to the next save point, hit start, then you hit L1, R1, circle, and then you would get a title sequence. And it was like, here she is, she's just magically on your team, like she would just plop. I tried that and obviously it never worked.
Chances are, the rumour you've just heard isn't the one you learned about from your school friend or an internet message board. You may have heard that Tifa will sacrifice herself to save Aerith if you max out the right relationship stat, or perhaps that unlocking Aerith's final limit break before her encounter with Sephiroth will prevent her from dying. Or maybe you heard the one about returning to the Forgotten City and using underwater materia to dive into the lake where Aerith was laid to rest, where you can then use a fully upgraded cure materia to revive her. All these claims were different, but in the end, they were all the same. Bogus. False. Untrue. There is no way to save Aerith. That's not to say that there wasn't something strange going on though. Players who revisited the church in the Sector 5 slums would sometimes catch a brief glimpse of Aerith. Was it a glitch, or was it a ghost? After 2 decades of speculation, a video uploaded in 2019 claimed to have worked it all out. According to Oddheader, a YouTuber specialised in video game mysteries, there was actually a grain of truth in one of the long-standing rumours. To resurrect Aerith, he explained, you have to collect 3 items: the Earth Harp, the Desert Rose, and the Guidebook, and then fight all opponents at the Gold Saucer's 3D battle arena, including a secret invisible 5th enemy. Then you have to give the 3 items to the Old Man in Calm, and then head to the Ghost of Aerith in the church. Then you have to switch your controller port and finally hit L1, R1 and circle together. That is the secret to resurrecting Aerith.
When I put that video up, suddenly it exploded. Like it went to 1 million like really quick. On that first day, I got some anxiety about it because I figured it was going to go mostly out to my audience, and instead it went out, it went viral. There was people upset, there's definitely people upset.
Why were people upset? Well, the date the video premiered is a vital part of the story. April 1st. The whole thing was an April Fool's joke.
Honestly, the whole video was actually based on a comic that I got. I get submissions all the time and they're fake and silly things, but that was the first one where I looked at that and I was like, well, maybe there is a glitch. I haven't heard of that. And then of course, to find out that it was false, I was like, well, I believed it, so I think I can convince enough people that that it's true then.
The comment, posted on a previous Oddheader video about Final Fantasy VII Mysteries, theorised that giving the Earth Harp, Desert Rose and Guidebook to the Old Man in Calm would revive Aerith's glitch ghost in the church. It was another false rumour, of course, but Oddheader saw an opportunity to blend that myth with plenty of truth to create a video that wasn't just a prank, but something based on genuinely interesting trivia.
I mixed a lot of legitimate discoveries with fake discoveries, so it was also an excuse to cover a lot of things that I had been wanting to cover, but it really wouldn't fit in a video otherwise. Like, for instance, I make a big deal about all the extra cross-dressing dialogue that was data mined from the game, which was found decades later. There's also the hidden opponent that can be found in the 3D battler. Like, if you were to beat all 4 opponents, you get a 5th invisible opponent that always kills you immediately. That's real. And I thought that was so cool.
Fascinatingly, the weirdest part of Oddheader's video is actually rooted in fact. In his faked footage of the resurrection, the music distorts and visuals warp as Aerith says to Cloud, "Silly, didn't anyone tell you? This is Hades." It's a line taken directly from Final Fantasy VII, albeit from a scene players were never meant to see.
It was largely based on another discovery where if you hacked into a debug room, you could talk to her and she had special dialogue and there was a number of options. And one of the options I think was like, "What is this place?" Something along those lines. And then she's like, "Oh, don't you know?" this is Hades. That line, this is Hades, that kind of became a little bit of a meme on the channel. So it was definitely like, what if that line was supposed to be in the game? Because it would make sense that lines that you would find in the debug room were actually intended to be in the game.
Of course, for every truth in Oddheader's video, there's a lie.
I full-on faked a magazine quote. Like, she showed the magazine. Like, I feel bad. Like, I quoted all these fake quotes and attributed them to people. I'm like, I hope they didn't get mad for like finding out that I faked all this stuff.
Then there's the fake Square employee who tipped Oddheader off about the L1R1 circle code. Anyone suspicious enough to run a quick Google would have found that their name, Honto Janai, translates to not really in English. But it wasn't just emails and magazine evidence that needed to be faked. To create a video, Oddheader needed gameplay footage of the resurrection in action.
I have a lot of people coming to me like, can I get that mod? I want to use it in my video. You know, a lot of the Final Fantasy community actually, and that was all basically animation. Aerith being there in the scene, she's basically cropped in from another scene, so half of the image is cropped. I had to download the font face, and I literally had to crop each character out of that font face and manually position them into place on the dialogue box, and then frame by frame I animate the text like like writing in and everything. It was literally done frame by frame. It took me weeks. The audio kind of like time warps or time stretches, even doing those sound effects and stuff. I was like, I know the PlayStation can't really do this, like on the fly in real time, manipulate the audio like that. But that was the fun of the mystery. Like, what if Aerith, you revived her and suddenly she's making your console doing things that you wouldn't expect? So it was definitely inspired largely by the idea of creepypastas.
The video went live on April 1st, 2019, and quickly became one of Oddheader's most watched and most disliked videos of all time. While many instantly realized the joke and enjoyed the fun, plenty of others were caught up in the hoax.
I remember when the video went up, and I felt kind of bad about it, a journalist, a reporter for Vice, tweeted it out. And he was like, and he tagged me. He's like, you did it. He's like, all these years, I can't believe it. And then immediately all these people replied, they're like, check the date of the video, dude. And what's so funny to me, I thought it was a dead giveaway when Aerith at the end says, let's roll, homie.
Today, the video has over 2 million views and continues to fool people. That doesn't bother Oddheader though.
That's part of the fun of video games, is we love to make up little secrets and stuff, and some of them turn out to be true, and that's really exciting. This just happens to be a dud. If you're truly a fan of the game, this should not be unfamiliar territory. I mean, the legend of reviving Aerith has been, since the game has come out. I think literally since the game came out, people were making that legend up.
In its own way, the legend keeps Aerith alive. But while it seems like the book is well and truly closed on any hidden in-game method of saving Aerith, there is some truth in the idea that a glitch could be the secret to defying death. In 2013, speedrunner Neoheart uploaded a video to his YouTube channel revealing a wild discovery in the PC version of Final Fantasy VII. He'd found that the cutscene in which you recruit Yuffie is somehow connected to your previous game over state. That connection can be exploited to warp from the Yuffie encounter back to the battle you failed. And that could be almost any battle, even a boss fight from the very end of the game. The potential for speedrunning was obvious, but players soon realized that this Yuffie warping glitch could be used to skip the Forgotten City and prevent Aerith's death. But the result of this glitch is purely mechanical. It keeps Aerith in the party, and she can be leveled up and made a vital part of your battle strategy, but she's nothing more than a voiceless warrior. She's not in any cutscenes and has no role in the story. She is soulless. To truly give Aerith life after death, her story had to be rewritten. The code and script of the game needed to be changed to allow you to save her life and fight alongside her to protect the planet. And that's exactly what happened.
Destiny's Crossroads.
New Threat is an ambitious overhaul for the PC version of Final Fantasy VII. It's the work of a modder known as Sega Chief, and has a completely refreshed approach to battles, bosses, character progression, and artificial intelligence.
I think what I really want to do is just surprise people and just keep them interesting, or add little things in and maybe not document them, just so that they can discover them on their own. That's how the Aerith thing came about originally, because I was just working on the combat. I didn't really have any intention of doing anything story-wise.
What started as a mod to remix the game's combat became increasingly more advanced and complex. The game was split into two pathways, Type A and Type B, with Type B featuring significant changes to not just the game's mechanics, but to its story too. Near enough every boss is different from those in the original game. There are brand new conversations, events play out in different ways. Even the famous wall market cross-dressing scenario is replaced with a challenging multi-phase battle in Don Corneo's dungeon. But the change new threat is most famous for is the one that finally makes the rumours true. You can save Aerith.
So originally, I just went with that kind of old joke, the Phoenix Down. Bit of an eye roller, but it was usually quite funny on streams because people in chat would say that beforehand. It's just use the Phoenix Down. But later on, I decided to try and make it a bit more seamless, just trying to incorporate it into the gameplay mechanics a bit more. So I scripted the boss AI to have Aerith in that fight, and there's a revive used, and then she kind of fights against the player. And if the player is able to knock out the boss without taking out Aerith as well, then it goes this alternate route where you keep Aerith around. I just figured it would be nice to have the gameplay mechanic do it rather than have like a dialogue option or something, or some other requirement that you have to go do a fetch quest or something. I just wanted it to be a bit more interesting.
But working out how to implement Aerith's resurrection was just the start. Aerith was now alive for the rest of the game. That's hours and hours of story. That meant Sega Chief had to rewrite the script to acknowledge her survival.
I try to keep the footprint of it as little as possible. Scenes where all the characters appear, you just add a copy in and repurpose the dialogue, the animations, and then you're good to go. But there was a scene towards the end of this too, which I knew was going to be problematic. I think it was Cosmo Canyon when they start talking about Aerith and what she was maybe doing before she passed away. I think that was the big problem because you can't have that when she's standing there. I think one of the best ways of getting out of a plot hole is to revisit stuff that's gone before and look for something that you can use, and I think one of the things was she wasn't sure what she was going there for and things like that, so there's a bit of ambiguity. So I was able to use that and repurpose that into the scene, and that seemed to work out.
Not long after the sequence in the Forgotten City, Cloud discovers the home of Professor Gast, Aerith's biological father. With Aerith now alive for this moment, Sega Chief had to carefully re-script the scenario in order to strike the right tone.
Scenes like that I find a bit more awkward because you have to be careful about how you handle it, because you can get a bit too melodramatic, so I try and find a balancing act if I can, or just try and not go to one extreme, try and make it too lighthearted, or try and make it too melodramatic, and try and find that kind of middle ground.
It was also important to keep Aerith's sense of adventure alive, and so not everything could be focused on her very important relationship with the planet and plot. You get to see her go a little wild during the Seas of Junon when she beats Scarlet over the head with a chair, a fun reference to the Final Fantasy VII Remake. But the best example of New Threat's approach to writing can be found during the flashback to Zack's death.
Basically, I needed to find a place to put each character's limit breaks, so it always starts usually from a gameplay kind of thing. I also was working on a request that people wanted Des to be a bit more involved in the story past disc 1, so I was looking for opportunities to do that. At Cloud's scene where he's talking about Zack, and that's when it kind of clicked that maybe that's a good place for that to be placed.
With Aerith now in the party, this sequence is not just Cloud putting together the last pieces of his fractured memory, but also Aerith finally discovering the tragic fate of her boyfriend. As the two reflect on the loss of Zack, their final limit breaks are unlocked. It's a poignant way to conclude their personal stories.
When you get to the scene, it zooms up. I figured if it could zoom back down and have the two of them there instead of blacking out like it usually does and going back to the genre basement, that could be a nice way to round that out, get a scene there, and then add on the limit breaks there. It just seemed like a neat solution, so I just went with it.
Thanks to New Threat, Aerith finally gets to ride the high wind and embrace her love of adventure. But despite the mod's popularity and success, Sega Chief occasionally wonders if bringing Aerith back from the dead was the right call.
Sometimes I regret adding the feature in. You never say it's an objective improvement, really. What I've learned over the years is that people have different expectations of what they want out of it. Some people are replaying it to enjoy the story again. Other people are looking for something new and interesting, or they've heard about that feature and they want to experience it, things like that. So you have to kind of keep all that in mind when you're making things like this. But I think for the remake, they have to kind of maybe be careful about doing things like that, or they'll get quite a bit of backlash.
Somewhat similar to New Threat, the ongoing official Final Fantasy VII Remake series is a complete reimagining of the original game. Dealing with themes of fate and destiny, the rewritten events see Cloud and Aerith choose a very different path. So far, that has already resulted in Zack surviving his encounter with the Shinra guards who killed him in the original game. And so it stands to reason that the upcoming second game in the trilogy, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, could go anywhere, including avoiding Aerith's death. Just the possibility of that is already both exciting and controversial.
As much as I love her, and same with Zach, like I love Zach, and seeing him come back was, oh my gosh, but at the same time, both of their deaths were so monumental and had such a huge impact on the series that I don't know if I want them to go that route. As much as I'd love to see them alive, it's too much. Like everything that happened was meant to happen and obviously changed many of our lives and many of our gaming experiences. The fact that so many people talk about Aerith's death, have it up there in the list as one of the most monumental deaths in a video game, it speaks volumes.
I think it will go ahead, but maybe not in the same place. They have successfully made it so that you're not quite sure what's going to happen next. But I think that things will play out more or less the same.
It would definitely be a game changer. I mean, I would have to go make another April Fool's video that that shows that you can still kill her, I guess.
Regardless of the remake's eventual path, one of its enduring legacies will have been providing many, many more hours for players to get to know and appreciate one of Final Fantasy's most iconic and important characters.
I think a lot of people do remember her from her death scene in the original game, and because of that there's always this kind of sadness when people talk about Aerith. They kind of don't talk about how she is in the game, but they talk about like how they felt when she died. What I really love about especially the remake is that a lot more people are experiencing her as I feel like she was intended to be. So you're reminded that she isn't just this sort of somber character that goes and sacrifices herself in the game. She's not just sort of headed towards this death sentence, but she's really full of life, and she just brings this really big sense of adventure to Final Fantasy VII.
Despite happening over 25 years ago, Aerith's death remains one of the most memorable and discussed moments in the history of video games. The emotional impact of her loss is revealing. Only a truly unforgettable character could be the starting point for one of gaming's most persistent urban myths, a legion of cosplaying fans, a hoax video with over 2 million views, and a painstakingly crafted mod that rewrites her story. Aerith may have died, but Aerith lives on thanks to the enduring love of the Final Fantasy